BBSRC's activities, BBSRC's current program, and then we're going to have 2 spotlight sessions, one led by Nick Bassett on commercialisation and one led by Jeff Grainger on peer review. These are very, very important topics to us at the moment, and we hope that you'll be able to enjoy those sessions and contribute to our thinking. And then, as I said, at the end we'll be dealing with some questions that have come in previous to today, but also live questions amongst the executive team. So this webinar is an opportunity for us to hear from you, our community, about what you'd like to kind of perhaps discuss and move forward on, and for us to share where we are with the current strategic delivery plan and the future directions, and our role basically in supporting UKI bioscience, whether that be commercialisation strategy, peer review, reform, creativity, etc. A wide-ranging remit. It's also important and an opportunity for you, our community, to tell us what you think. So during the webinar, we'll be able to hear from you, and please put in questions into the chat, and we welcome your viewpoints from all sectors and career paths. We already, as I said, we hope to answer some questions which have already come in, but please put more in during today's webinar. I just want to give a brief reference to some sort of basic housekeeping duties. We are recording this webinar, and we will be making it available to the wider UKI community. We encourage comments and viewpoints from people right across the bioscience sector, that whichever part of that you belong to in terms of the subdiscipline, whether you're from industry, whether you're from government, or whether you're from the academic community, and whether you're at the start of your career or the end of your career. We welcome views from the full base that we interact with. To support accessibility during this meeting, we've closed the captions. The captions are enabled, but you can use the CC button at the bottom of your screen to show or hide those captions should you want to. You'll be muted for the duration of this panel, and we cannot see your video. So to give a brief introduction in terms of what we do, I'm sure most of you are very, very familiar with this. In terms of BBSRC, we invest in world-class discovery and strategic bioscience research. Discovery principally through responsive mode and strategic LOLAs, and strategic largely through managed programs, which you will see various calls throughout a particular year, and that's to advance the frontiers of biology and drive towards a healthy, prosperous and sustainable future. We also invest in bioscience training and skills, whether that be in terms of new PhD students, or whether it be for fellowships, or the kind of the grants that we put out in terms of the training programs within them. We invest in cutting-edge infrastructures to support bioscience research. And basically what we're trying to do is drive the widest possible social and economic impact from our bioscience in industry, policy and public goods. That's particularly good because that enables us to make the case for more funding. It enables the public to really appreciate what we do, and it enables the government to continue to fund in this area. And one way we can do that is promoting public dialogue and engagement on biosciences, because that's an area which then enables us to show what we do and to actually win further funding to do more of that. A significant proportion of our funding actually goes into providing funding towards 8 strategically supported research institutes. They provide the national capability and expertise in strategically important areas, ranging from sustainable agriculture right through to advanced genomics and bioinformatics. And at the core of those are our research and innovation campuses. And we produced a strategy about our institutes in 2021, and I urge people to read that because it has lots of really interesting thinking about capability, connectivity and culture, and we and working together with the institutes themselves and the academic community and higher education institutes, working with them is an important part of our future. And we urge you to kind of read those reports. So if you take UKI published a strategy in 2022, and that was the first long-term 5-year strategy that UKI produced, called Transforming Tomorrow Together. And it sets out the long-term high level priorities for how we'll deliver a vision for an outstanding research and innovation system in the UK. And it provides everyone with the opportunity to contribute and to benefit, which means hopefully we enrich lives locally, nationally, and globally. Again, reinforcing why investment in this area is extremely important. It also highlights how UK has a key role in delivering the government's ambitions. The government produced a science and technology framework, which I urge you all to read, about how the UK hopes to become, or is currently and will maintain, a global leadership in research and innovation. And UKI is a very important vehicle in enabling that to happen. And it's structured around the ideas of 4 principles of change. That's diversity, connectivity, resilience, and engagement. I don't have time to go into all of those today, but again, if you've not read the strategy, I suggest that would be a very important thing for you to do. But if we pick up on some of the specifics in that strategy, people and careers, places, ideas, innovation, and impacts, then it's those that you will see often coming up in terms of why we are funding various things, or how we kind of going to work together across UKI to kind of deliver to those. So that's why reading these plans is important and help shape some of your thinking. BBSRC produced a strategic delivery plan, which was the mechanism by which BBSRC itself would deliver the UKI strategy. And again, that's aligned to the Spending Review 21 budget allocation. And for those who don't know, the UKI outcome for that was probably the best in history. So therefore, a good kind of reminder of why working together with the other research councils as part of UKI, we had a louder voice and we were able to kind of get a bigger return accordingly. So these 2 documents, as I say, I suggest it's really worth you reading them. Within the BBSRC strategy, you'll see that we are focusing on these same areas: people and careers, places, ideas, innovation, and impacts. With our organization, you can see there. I'm going to pick up on each of these in the following slides. But as I said, I think, again, those who have not read this plan, I suggest you do. It will put you in a very aware state in terms of kind of the thinking, the direction of travel, and then couple your innovation and creativity and your ideas in a way in which you can begin to see how they can map on to the sorts of work that's important to us. And obviously there is always the responsive mode discovery bioscience, but some of the more managed programs, being aware of some of these things will perhaps be very important for you, being a chance of being more successful in some of them. So if we first start with people and careers, at last year's webinar, we discussed the importance of talent mobility, and that was highlighted by you. So in terms of you mentioning things, this is something which came up. We went away and we thought very hard about that and we reflected on it. And therefore, I'd like to kind of report back to you that, this is an example of where, when you offer us thoughts and ideas, we listen and we can respond. So, for instance, for the first time ever, in terms of the UKI policy fellowship program, we partnered with the Arts and Humanities Research Council and the Economic and Social Research Council to produce a fellowship program in policy. And again, that enables us to have deeper and more enduring connections between researchers and policymakers. Again, this is something that's extremely important in terms of the likelihood of biosciences staying on the front of political agendas, therefore likely to get more funding in a future spending review. And we are supporting 7 fellowships in that bioscience policy interaction. Our flexibility talent mobility account pilots, they support and secondments and placements of research staff into new environments. Again, one of the things that Ottoline, the chief executive of UKRI, is very keen on, and something I published actually in Nature in 2016, was this aspect of people having a more porous career. And what do we mean by that? We mean people spending periods of time in academia, in industry, in the government, in kind of the public sector, and learning from those times in those, and being able to move between those organizations during, say, a 30 or 40-year career. And these flexible talent mobility accounts are ways in which you can begin to kind of get experience in terms of placing, having opportunity to work in new environments. And the next deadline for that, in fact, it's a short notice, I'm afraid, but it's next week, if you didn't know, on the 28th of November. So it's worth flagging there. And the other thing that I'd like to bring up about funding, and that is we are about to relaunch our doctoral training funding in what's called now UKRI Collective Talent. There's a webinar about this on the 7th of December, and we're going to reshape how we fund doctoral training from 2024. So look out for that. And I think what you'll see is, again, us reflecting on what we're hearing from you, the community, what we're hearing from the wider bioscience community, and what we're hearing from, say, the public and the government about the future in terms of what we want PhD training to look like and the sorts of areas we'd like PhD training to kind of be in. And again, I think one of the things I'd like to highlight is that this is an area, again, where I think UKRI has really shown a real opportunity to all of us, in which all the research councils have come together in this collective talent area and shared good practice and shared what works and shared kind of ways forward. And that has enabled BBSRC to work very closely with MRC and EPSRC, etc. So we can kind of all identify if we want to try to change the way doctoral students are trained, or if we want to try and change the likelihood of where they might work in the future, then we can learn from good practice and share our knowledge with each other, which is really helpful. That moving on to places, I think I would like to say that we have invested significantly in our institutes in recent times, in which £376 million has been awarded to 7 of the 8 of our institutes in the 2022 Institute Assessment Exercise. Babraham hasn't been officially announced yet. We've only just done the IAE for Babraham, but they will be joining the other 7 institutes in their IAE award soon. I'm also very pleased to say that we've also invested £317 million in the John Innes Centre, the Sainsbury Lab Next Generation Infrastructure Programme for Plant and Microbial Sciences, to support the development of some critical national capabilities in that area at the Norwich Research Park. Revolutionising wheat has also been a big program which has involved many of our strategic institutes together with some university partners. For instance, Leeds, Nottingham, Lancaster, Bristol and Imperial College London have been working with Rothamsted, John Innes Centre, Quadram, Earlham Institute and NIAB in really advancing what we understand about wheat and how we can have big impact in that area, both nationally and internationally. And a really exciting development I'd like to flag is the Biotech Business Incubation Centre. This is a partnership with the Science and Technology Facility Centre, supporting biotechnology startups in the northwest of England. And we hope to be able to kind of do more in this space, working with other research councils to focus in on innovation right across the country. And again, I urge people to look at that and see what happens. And as you'll see on that slide there, finally, I think all of us are very, very excited that we were able to associate with Horizon Europe, as again a very strong community message from all of you. And I know many of you are very involved in trying to put the message out to the right people in terms of the negotiations about this program. And from a bioscience point of view, this is a very important for us and for you. And one of the things I would say is, please get reconnected with your European collaborators. It's extremely important that we put in as many bids as possible and continue to play a major role in Horizon Europe. You know, to use the expression, if use it or lose it, it's important that we are seen to be an active part of Horizon Europe, so in future discussions and future arrangements, it can be seen as a successful thing now that we have rejoined. In terms of ideas, I think we're prioritizing investigator-led research. So that's what I said in terms of responsive mode. £150 million invested in responsive mode in 2022 and 2023. And we've just invested £18 million in supporting 4 strategic LOLA projects. Strategic LOLAs are these programs where we take an area of science led by an individual and working closely with others with a track record of BBSRC work to kind of really give some momentum and push in that area. So the 4 projects are Rules of Life in Microbial Communities, led by Sophie Nixon at Manchester; Human Heart Development, led by Sanjay Sinha at Cambridge; GlycoWeb, led by Kathy Merry at the University of Nottingham; and Bacterial Cell Wall Formation, led by David Roper at the University of Warwick. We're launching, or it's currently in progress, £20 million for the next round of strategic LOLAs. So for those people interested, please look out for that. And on the right-hand side there, you can see from a previous LOLA based at Bristol University, how some advances in structural genomics have provided fundamental knowledge regarding the mechanisms and machinery involved in photosynthesis and cellular energy production. A great example of the kind of idea that are led through our strategic LOLA program. And then finally, again, another example of us listening to feedback from you, we delivered the Pioneer Awards this year, £12 million supporting 62 early stage projects with the potential to transform fundamental understanding of biological systems. And again, that was, you said to us that it was important there was a way in which high risk, high reward culture and research ideas could stand a chance of getting through funding systems, and our response was this Pioneer program, and we were incredibly excited by the kind of the level of interest and the excellent applications that we received, and we were really pleased that we were able to fund that number of them. In terms of innovation, which I think is a really important area, because again, this enables us to really demonstrate why investment in biosciences is so critical. And we'll hear more about this from Nick Bassett immediately after I've stopped speaking. But we're doing more and more work with Innovate UK. So we currently have £50 million of joint investment with Innovate UK, ranging from issues around food systems through to sustainable biomanufacturing. And our business and academic kind of partnerships in terms of prosperity is a call which is open. The deadline's the 20th of December. And again, I think it's important for you to look at that, especially those people who have ideas that they think are on the journey towards translation, towards impact and development. And on the right-hand side there, and I'm sure many people on the call are always very pleased when you've got new products which might make your skin look healthier, is that this work which is developed between Boots and the University of Manchester, the number 7 Future Renew products, which seem to reverse the signs of skin damage. And I think it's a great example of work which started in terms of fundamental bioscience, and then a series of funding opportunities which enabled the researchers to continue working, such that eventually now Boots across the country have these products which I'm told are in very high demand. And certainly that's something my wife told me. So you know, this is it's a great example of how our science has really moved forward. And in terms of delivering impact, again, I think the ability for bio-based solutions to tackle national and global challenges. We're particularly excited about the National Engineering Biology Programme, which has got funding from the Technology Missions Fund to the tune of £74 million. And I think this really will kind of revolutionize many aspects and really bring biosciences to the eyes of many people. And on the right hand side there we have a really nice example which was based at the Norwich Research Park, and in fact was a finalist in the Earthshot Prize this year. And it's a company which is using kind of ideas from synthetic and engineering biology to cut the chemical pollution by 80% and uses 77% less water in terms of the production of colors. And they've been working with H&M fashion industry to do this. And as I said, I think it's a great example of a piece of work of engineering microbes to enable kind of new ways of in a more, shall we say, sustainable fashion, replacing kind of existing products with these new products, whilst fitting in to the current business models and supply chains which exist. As you know, there's a real interest in the cross UKI strategic themes. I've just listed 4 here. There's a 5th one to do with creating improving outcomes by creating kind of cultures, and that also has a very big bioscience element. But when you look at these in terms of whether it be building a green future, better health, aging and well-being, tackling infections, or transformative technologies, you can see there are huge areas which are being invested in which BBSRC is right at the center of the activities and working very closely with other research councils to deliver. The one that I am looking after, tackling infections, for instance, we are currently got a large call in antimicrobial work, and it's working across UK and across government to look at that. And we've also had recent kind of great announcements about vaccine innovation for both humans and for animals. And again, I urge you all to look at this and identify areas in which you can kind of really work across the boundaries of disciplines, and that enables us to kind of tackle these kind of big challenges which are out there. And I was on a meeting just yesterday with the other leads of these, in which we are wanting to kind of really move these forward and kind of begin to kind of highlight why these areas are such important for investment, and beginning to kind of tell the stories of the great work that's going on and the future work that could happen if there's continued investment and interest in these areas. So as I said, the one on tackling infection, we have got the first phase is a big investment in areas around antimicrobial resistance. So as I say, please identify these as a very good way forward. That's bringing me to the end now. So looking ahead, I think it's an exciting time for biology, and I'm sure you all appreciate that. We just re-energized or relaunched the Big Ideas pipeline. So I ask you all by 12th of January to identify, put in ideas, whether it be about revolutionary technology, whether it be about an idea which actually won't require huge amounts of funding, but it could actually transform quite a lot of our thinking, or whether it's kind of a real moonshot type idea. We don't have a pot of money sitting here ready for this, but these ideas enable us to shape our thinking moving forward. We have a spending review coming up, and we have other ways in which we can work with others across government and across UKI. So please respond to that and share with us the excitement that you have for biosciences too. And finally, looking ahead, I think I've just had a couple of meetings in the last 2 weeks, last week with the BBSRC community, and this week with a big strategic priority fund of academics and industry and the public sector in the room together. And the one thing that's very, very clear is I think we've all been missing meeting one another. And whilst having meetings like this enables great engagement and we can fit it into our days, there's nothing like coming together face to face to brainstorm and discuss things. So I think I'd like to make 2024 the opportunity for us to connect and reconnect with each other. And we welcome again ideas you might have in terms of ways in which we can facilitate and help make those sorts of things happen. Because I think it's in those meetings where new partnerships occur, and it enables us to deliver, therefore, our shared ambition for the biosciences. And as I said, building those partnerships enables us to actually kind of come together, help define the stories, help define the next areas of work, and basically demonstrate the strength of our community, the strength of opportunity moving forward, and therefore we can be very good advocates for the importance of bioscience. And in terms of that advocacy, I urge you all to continue telling the stories that come out of biosciences. Try to promote the impact of investment in biosciences and what it actually delivers. And by doing that and working together, we can ensure that the biosciences of the future, that is what the public like to see, what we, the academic community, kind of like to share, and we will continue to get the investment to enable us to do all the things that I know we'd all be very, very, very keen to do. So thank you for joining me, and I now will stop sharing my screen, and I'd like to introduce Nick Bassett, who is going to be the first of these two sort of deep dive areas we're going to have. And Nick is going to talk to us about commercialization. Over to you, Nick.
Hi, thank you very much, Guy. Appreciated. Let me just share my screen here. So is it showing the right screen? Could someone give me a thumbs up if they can see it? Yeah, okay, I'm assuming it is. So my name is Nick Bassett. I'm the Associate Director of Innovation at BBSRC, and I'm going to talk to you about research commercialization. I'm going to talk about it within the context of the UKRI ambition and vision for commercialization. And I'd like to use the opportunity to really bring some BBSRC interventions to light, and bring them to light and show how they work in anger, if you like, within the system through some case studies. At the end of this, I'd really appreciate your feedback, as with the rest of my team, around which of the interventions I talk about today were you aware of, because we're trying to understand how much we're permeating the community, if you like, but also where you see the greatest challenges for commercializing bioscience research going forwards. The slides are relatively information dense, and they are designed for sharing, and there's links in them which I hope you will find useful after. So as a start point, why should we care about research commercialization? And I think the answer there is all of us will recognize the unrivaled potency and potential of bioscience, and in terms of benefiting society, growing the economy, and probably most importantly, protecting the environment in the longer term. But to do that, we need to take the academic knowledge and convert it into practical application. And research commercialization is one of the best trodden routes for doing that, for taking that know-how and turning it into a usable and accessible format to drive forward those positive benefits. Bioscience is incredibly pervasive, and increasingly so as we deal with some of the societal challenges. And you'll find it embedded within a huge range of markets, everything from agriculture to energy, personal care to sport, transport to well-being. But one of the really important things about bioscience is it's often a component. You won't go to the shop and buy a product and say, oh, that's a bioscience product, but you will buy an enormous number of products that have got a bio-based solution as part of their production. So it's often unseen, it's often within supply chains, and often commercialization revolves around businesses working with businesses. But it's absolutely fundamental to economic growth. And as you'll see from a report that we're due to release in the middle of December, which looks at BBSRC spinouts, a cohort of just 402 who will have all had varying elements and levels of success, but in aggregate are expected to deliver 7 billion in terms of GVA over a 20-year time frame. So what's our ambition as BBSRC? Well, it's simply to connect up that research and innovation system, encourage and support bioscience innovation in the right way, and empower bioscience entrepreneurs in driving things forward. That obviously is all within the context of UKRI's vision for commercialisation, which sits around 3 key strands. The first is around using our unique position as the biggest funder of research in the UK to influence and incentivise research commercialisation. It also sits around us taking a look at ourselves and our products, services, interventions and activities, and thinking about how that we join them up more effectively, avoid creating cul-de-sacs for innovation, and letting people to work through the system. And also, finally, to be the advocate for research commercialisation, and indeed identify others in the community who we can work with around advocacy, underpinning it all with robust data and evidence as to why it's important. Let's take a look at 2 hopefully fairly well-known BBSRC interventions. One is the IAA programme, which is a programme where awards are allocated to a research organisation in line with their strategic objectives. IAAs are very broad. They're not just commercialisation, they're around impact. But often you can see the beginnings and the spark of commercialisation coming through IAA projects that are allocated through their research organisation. Then the follow-on fund. The follow-on fund is very much our programme which is around technical development of an idea in line with a market need. We've got really big ambitions for follow-on fund going forwards, both in terms of scale, but also in terms of the way it works. So, for example, we've begun to open the pipeline slightly now, and recognising the interdisciplinary nature of bioinnovation, any prior BBSRC IAA holder can now apply into follow-on fund, and indeed anyone who's been through the BBSRC iCure programme, which I'll talk about later. We'd like to go further as well. We'd like to think about how does it actually interact in a hardwired way with skills, with investors, with infrastructure. So there's lots to look at in this space. But the one message I'd give here is there's a range of size of project you can come in for, anything from 100 to 800. And I would encourage you to think about coming in for smaller programs at the start of a journey and thinking about whether you can use it to build the data and the evidence to then lead on to a larger follow-on fund award. And indeed, actually, if you've had a large follow-on fund award, but you still need to do some refinement around the proof of concept, etc., come back in again. We've moved it deliberately to panel only, and I know Jeff is going to be talking to you about review processes a bit later on. We've moved it to panel only to speed up the process, but also to give the panel more oversight of the portfolio of funded and at the funded awards from the past, but also applications as they're coming through in real time. So if we take a look at Erabagan uses their proprietary platform to essentially harness nature's diversity and identify bioactive compounds which are potentially of use within the therapeutic and agrochemical areas. Their USP is their 20 times greater hit rate than synthetic chemicals. It's all built on research that took place at the University of Warwick. They had a multiplicity of support, including iCure, as well as follow-on fund, as well as IAAs, etc. They've filed a patent, they've attracted significant VC interest and investment, and as you can see, they're named as one of the top tech bio companies to watch in 2023 by Sifted. BBSRC, and Guy's alluded to this, BBSRC has huge ambitions around developing our research and innovation systems and environments, both the existing ones that we have in campuses, but also looking wider for other opportunities. So BBSRC is a key partner on 5 campuses across the UK. Each of those campuses, at its very core, has an institute or institutes. Indeed, 7 of the 8 of the strategically funded institutes are on campuses. The only one that's not is Pirbright, but that's for fairly obvious reasons, that it's not on a physical campus with the security constraints, etc. But Pirbright is already incredibly well linked regionally, nationally, and internationally, and we're working with them to think about how we can improve that as well. Guy's already talked to the sheer amount of money that goes into research capability and research at the institutes, but we're also a key partner in these campuses. And what does that mean? Well, that means that we work with private funders, we work with public funders, and think about how we can leverage and incentivize innovation, growth, and space and capability on those campuses. And at the moment, the campuses are over 200 tenant companies, employing over 2,300 people, and have attracted over £1.2 billion worth in private investment. But there's still more to do. So we recently introduced a thing called the Campus Innovation Award, which allows companies on those campuses to work with any of the BBSRC institutes, and indeed any of the STFC institutes, on a grant which is leveraged against private investment. That was so successful, we've now rolled that program out for another 3 years. And again, we have big ambitions around this and how we can work more collectively across the UKRI infrastructure portfolio. Guy's already talked to it. What do we mean with our ambitions going forward? Well, the BioBIC in Daresbury, it's an excellent opportunity for us to identify where we can intervene. We did it because we've invested over £100 million worth of research in the northwest of England over the last 5 years, and we know that there's a nascent emerging enterprise biotech community emerging around the area, and we are looking to be the bridge between those two systems. An example of a company that's been through this element of BBSRC support, if you like, is SugarRox. So SugarRox develops biostimulants which will increase productivity, increase resilience, and increase sustainability of crop production. It emerges from some work done at Rothamsted by Cara Griffiths and Matthew Paul at Rothamsted, and then working with Ben Davis at the University of Oxford. It had a follow-on funding, and really critically, it went through one of the accelerator programs that we have on our campuses, in this case, SHAKE. The company is now based on Rothamsted, attracted lots of early stage VC money, which it offloaded the risk against continued grant raising from Innovate and DEFRA, and has just recently secured a significant investment from UKI2S, who again, I will talk about in a second. Indeed, UKI2S, UK Innovation and Science Seed Fund, it's a high risk, early stage, a patient venture capital investor. It's under over £100 million now, and actually £33 million of that is thanks to investment from BBSRC in the Engineering Biology Subfund, which sits within it. It's got two key USPs as an investor. The first is that it works really early with academics and companies to shape ideas and get them ready for investment, which is something that traditional VCs won't tend to do. The second thing is it's there to create long-term runways of money for companies to scale by syndicating and working with other investors at the earliest stages, pre-seed and seed. It's relevant to this community because any project or company coming from an institute, a BBSRC institute, any company on a BBSRC campus, any company doing engineering biology, or any company working with a catapult centre are all in scope of UKI2S investment. The next one is iCure. So it's exactly what Innovate does, and we're partnering with Innovate on this, and we've created a bioscience specific iCure program. It's a way of taking ideas from the lab and testing them with your customer base and shaping that idea as you go forward. Some of the key differences that exist in our element of the program is it's open to anybody with prior UKRI funding, as long as they are dealing with a bioscience solution, a bio solution in their commercial concept. It's open to people from any career stage, so obviously early career researchers, but also PIs, technicians, so on and so forth. And we know that Innovate have now followed that model and open up their Innovate iCure also. And it's open, importantly, to people from institutes, which in the past that was not available. And when the slides come around, there's a link on there. There's 2 versions of iCure, BBSRC iCure, currently open, and I'd urge you to sign up to that if you're interested. And finally, on this slide, the innovation bulletin. So on roughly a quarterly basis, BBSRC produces a bulletin which you can sign up for, which captures all of our innovation-based activities. So that will be everything that I've talked about today, but it will also include that huge range of collaborative research and development opportunities. Guy alluded to prosperity partnerships earlier on, and industrial collaboration training opportunities. So again, when the slide comes round, I would urge you to sign up if this is of interest. My final case study is around hydrogen, and hydrogen's business model is around creating clean, safe, and sustainable chemicals. It all stems from some fundamental research that Professor Kylie Vincent secured, and went on to win Royal Society of Chemistry's competition around emerging technology. From there, it won an innovation voucher through BBSRC, and then went on to secure in 2016 a significant investment through the IB Catalyst. Building on that work, they identified Dr. Holly Reeve to become the entrepreneurial lead and go through an iCure program. The iCure program gave them confidence to spin out the company from the University of Oxford. The following year, then securing significant investment from UKI2S to go on and scale the company. But the critical point here is the journey doesn't stop there. Hydrogen are now working with the University of Nottingham, and it's important to recognize the system is a 3D connected system. It is not a linear pathway to market. There's no right way of getting to market, but there are a multiplicity of opportunities to you. So my final thought, regardless of how twee it is, and it's more or less a plea, but if you've invented a sundial, please don't leave it in the shade. And when the slides come around, we'd be absolutely delighted to hear from you if there's things we can help you with or connections that we can make going forwards. Thank you for your time. I believe I'm going to stop sharing, and I believe that in the chat, we should now have some Mentimeter. I'm just going to check. Brilliant. Thank you, Catherine. So the Mentimeter, is there a link in the chat as well? Yes, brilliant. Thanks very much, Laura. So there's those 2 questions that I'd like to have a look at, and I'd really appreciate your feedback on. So which of the interventions that I've talked about today have you heard of previously? We're trying to get a feel, as I say, for understanding the community's response to our offerings. And the other element of this is we'd really appreciate understanding where you see the greatest opportunities to support bioscience commercialization exist.
Thank you, Nick. And whilst people are working with Mentimeter, can you tell us a bit about the Sparking Innovation Conference?
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. So the Sparking Innovation Conference is an opportunity to essentially celebrate bioscience innovation, brings together the curious, brings together the experienced, it's innovators, entrepreneurs, investors, and the whole community in an opportunity to connect, which is, to your point, very important, to learn from one another, to share ideas. And last year, it's an annual conference. Last year, or rather this year, earlier this year, we had it in Bristol. We had 120 people signed up. Unfortunately, we were limited on space, so we couldn't accommodate everybody, representing 36 different research organizations and panelists from across the investment community, tech transfer experts, company CEOs, and alumni of our programs. And we've got one coming up again in May next year. So next year is in Edinburgh. We're going to go for a bigger venue. We're expecting to be able to host 150 delegates this time round. And again, it's going to be around fireside chats where we're going to be bringing some experts from the innovation system and taking their views and thoughts and learning, as well as three panels. And the three panels this time are going to be around bridging the gap, looking at concept to commercialization of bioscience endeavor. The second will be around breaking silos and strategies for creating seamless links for interdisciplinary innovation. And how do we do that? And we've got some great people signed up to that panel already. And then the third will be around turning bioscience research into a successful startup. And what does that look like and what are the components of that? So it's 2nd of May. Just as a teaser or a spoiler, if you like, we're also planning on a day before the event in Edinburgh, which will be, people will need to apply for, which will be around pitching and learning. But again, when the slides come around, please sign up and you'll be able to see how you do that. And Guy, subject to your kind of arrangements, if you're around on the 2nd of May in Edinburgh, it would be absolutely superb to see you there as well.
Thank you. And looking at the kind of the here biggest challenges, you know, I see funding is quite big there, and obviously your talk has illustrated the kind of the diversity of options in terms of the funding. Awareness too, if you look at the slide 1, it kind of it was actually quite interesting how many of these schemes, very few people are aware of them. So there's quite a nice link there between awareness and we can see obviously the funds which people are aware of and maybe responding to, but maybe some of those others, it's an interesting area where we've obviously got to connect and engage with people to make it much more available to them. And the other thing on that word cloud that came up was around time, from what I remember. And you know, I mean, obviously we all need to try to find and create time, and that is a difficult one. But again, I think that might come back to the connect and the engagement, because one thing I would urge people is, if there is an event and it's one where there is an opportunity like you described in Edinburgh for people to come together, you know, urge people to try and find the time to do that, because the time spent in something like that is time saved in terms of you know, some of these other aspects which are coming up. So thanks very much,
Thank you,
Nick, for going through that. It's really interesting, and I always find it, you know, wonderful when I hear the timeline stories from some sort of science of 10 or 11 or 12 years ago, and then the kind of the continued funding opportunity that comes from BBSRC right up to the moment that the company is really making things happen and actually diversifying from what they perhaps originally were doing. So really interesting. So that brings me to the next part of the session, which is with Jeff Grainger. And Jeff is going to talk to us about a really important topic. I'm sure there's nobody on the call who hasn't at some stage been asked to do peer review or external evaluation. So Jeff, interested to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Guy. I have attempted to share my screen. I'd be grateful if I could get a thumbs up or down.
Can see it.
You can see it. Fabulous. So as Guy introduced, this is a topic that's very live for us currently, and a lot of thinking has been done at both UKRI and across the councils, including BBSRC. And this is recognising the funding landscape's evolving, and so will the opportunities that come with that to do things differently to support it. But that brings new challenges and increasing pressures on the system, which we know are felt keenly by the community and funders alike. There is an imperative for us to be more efficient and to reduce the burdens on people where we can, whilst also achieving high quality outcomes. And that's always a tricky balance. I just wanted to start by saying everything I'm talking about today has been done by others, not me. And I wanted to acknowledge the work of a large number of people across teams and roles, particularly Abigail Reynolds and the UKRI Research and Innovation Culture team, the BBSRC Rules of Life team, and our Research and Innovation Funding Delivery team. So a lot of people have been involved. I've got quite a few slides to talk to, and it's my style to rattle through things quickly, but they will be made available afterwards if you want to review them in your own time. So just to kind of zoom out really where this is kind of starting from, if I may. In 2021, the government published a people and culture strategy, which set out a vision for attracting, retaining, developing and valuing the diversity of people that are needed for an inclusive and vibrant research and innovation system. And since this publication, UKRI has got a programme of work led by the Research and Innovation Culture team, which is supporting delivery of that strategy and working collaboratively with others to drive forward long-term change. And there's been a number of pieces of work that have been done on this, but a review of peer review was one of the commitments that was set out in that strategy. In this context, just to flag, we are talking about peer review processes as they are used in awarding research and innovation funding, not journals, not post-award assessment of stuff that's already happened. And it refers to a set of systems that have largely been in place since World War II, which is when governments first decided to devote large sums of public money to research. And the core aim has kind of remained constant, but over time there has been changes, and the kind of scope and scale of what we're trying to do with public funding has increased, and there have been various generations by which different layers of expectations have been kind of put onto the peer review system. Under that, the process for making decisions on what to fund has remained relatively constant. There's been relatively little innovation in the system for decades. And generally, almost all funders use pretty much the same process to decide what to fund. And we call this the baseline process. The baseline process looks something like this. Effectively, applications come in. The office does some checks to see whether they should have come in or whether they need to be turfed out. They go out to review, usually by a postal peer review. Then a panel pulls together those reviews, assesses them, and creates a recommended rank list, which is funded off by, signed off by the funders. It's used for all sorts of things, from research grants to business focused funding, fellowships, thematic funding, travel vouchers, anything you can think of. And as a rule, researchers generally trust this process, but it's also could be described as the worst process apart from all of the others. The least worst option is something which is often used to describe the peer review system and this baseline process. There's a large literature characterizing the strengths of this baseline process. It is trusted by the community, and least worst option is not as pejorative as it sounds. There have been many attempts to improve the process and find different ways of doing it. But there are some kind of baked-in problems which are around it being burdensome, an element of arbitrary decision-making. It's generally pretty conservative. It can be very biased. And it struggles to reward factors other than research excellence, which is difficult in itself to define. But beyond the process, baseline process, there are some mitigations and tweaks that can help to address those points. So the review of peer review kind of aimed to look at this, and this was undertaken on behalf of UKRI by Biotechnology, which is a consultancy, and I have nicked some of their slides here, so to acknowledge that and thank them. It looked at the alternatives or changes which are in the report described as interventions that can be made to that baseline process that I've just described. And the aim was to help funders designing grant-making processes to understand the evidence and the benefits and potential drawbacks of undertaking different approaches. It was not an assessment of UKRI processes, and the outputs are designed to be useful to all funders everywhere, not just UKRI. But we do recognise that peer review is at the core of what BBSRC and UKRI does, and over 20,000 applications or something like that are being assessed across the research councils each year. It's clearly the engine of what we do. So it's absolutely critical that we take an approach to look at this. So a number of interventions have been considered, 38 of them, which there are some examples of this on the screen that I'm not going to go through in depth. But typically, all of these interventions that were looked at tend to fulfill one of 7 aims, which is to modify the baseline process to save time, which is to speed up the time to grant, to improve the fit of applications to the aim of the funding scheme, to increase the ability to identify and fund high-risk, high-reward projects, to reduce the burden either on applicants or reviewers or panelists or administrators, to manage the application volume, so demand management, and to reduce bias and ensure greater participation, or to improve the quality of the reviews which are brought into the process. So those are kind of the categories in which all of these modifications tend to fall into. The outputs of the review is a report which was published in July and is available on the UKRI website that examines the evidence and the strength of the evidence for the different interventions, and also potential hazards and unintended consequences. It's a pretty long and detailed report, but it is actually relatively digestible if you haven't had a look at it. It provides a richness of evidence for funders everywhere looking to optimise and innovate on in award-making processes, and we're making a lot of reference to it. There's also an online tool that Technopolis have produced, which allows funders to explore the data in an interactive way to help them design peer review processes. There are a number of recommendations, 14 recommendations made in the report for funders, increasing the use of peer review colleges and testing innovations via pilots and follow-up evaluation, and really an emphasis on using the kind of evolving IT systems that we have to bring in flexibility and function. And this, of course, is at a time when we are in the process of rolling out the new funding service across UKRI, which aims to do exactly that. And recognising that investigations into wider research culture must proceed alongside more process-level interventions so that those two things can work in harmony. So what next on the UKRI level? The report is being used as a springboard to start to kind of work towards the aspiration of a centre of excellence in peer review, and lead basically to a longer term approach to bringing in evidence and making sure that we are using the tools in the most evidence-based way to deliver peer review across the system. And to be able to do this in a way that we've not had the capacity or the resources to be able to do when the research system was more fragmented. So there's a real opportunity working as a UKRI to be able to take really a global lead in peer review innovation. And that's the idea we're currently exploring. It's an early stage, but Guy is championing this process, and BBSRC will be right in the centre of it as far as we can. So alongside that kind of, I guess, more long-term piece around making a more coherent evidence-based approach to evolving peer review, BBSRC is not kind of waiting for that to happen. We are evolving our peer review systems to recognise that we really need to do so. We can't hang around. There are pressures on the system. There is a burden on the peer review community that manifests in low rates of engagement. The sustainability of the system is creaking. We need to be more efficient. We need to be faster. We need to be more inclusive. And the measures of success are evolving, the impact, training of early career researchers, the DORA principles, all of these things are kind of coming to bear on the peer review system, and we need to respond to it. And new opportunities to innovate that are around the use of IT, digital tools, machine learning, the ability to automate things that we couldn't use to automate. We've started to bring that to bear, both in our managed mode schemes and in responsive mode schemes. And as Nick has already alluded to, some of the approaches that we're increasingly using in managed mode to really also reflect that those schemes are either very highly targeted, have particular aims, or increasingly can be very large in scope and highly complex with multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary components. And that is really quite difficult to deliver with the baseline process. So the increasing use of panel-only reviews, multi-stage processes and interviews. We've also trialled rapid response approaches, and that really came to bear during COVID. And here sometimes actually a quick expert sanity check where speed is of the essence can be good enough. The key is really pulling together a balanced effort based on an understanding of what we're trying to achieve, the focus, the complexity, the funding available. Large pots clearly need more careful management than smaller pots. And this all links back to the tailoring of interventions that are cited in that review of peer review. In responsive mode, we've also really been pioneering some IT-led innovations and just simple things like the research committee discussion boards, which help us to tension the views before we get into the room, have been really quite impactful. And we're looking at things like the roles and composition of the pools of expert, particularly around EDI, and bringing in a broader range of perspectives and expertise. I'm going to use Pioneer Awards as an example of this, because this is perhaps the scheme which has really brought together most of these things that we've been trialing over the last 12 months. And this was a pilot scheme focused on early stage exploratory, high potential, high risk ideas. And we had huge interest, which was an immediate challenge. 512 expressions of interest, which resolved down to 327 applications received. The expert panels had really to focus on identifying only the most original and transformative projects. So that meant tailoring the assessment criteria to be able to deliver that. And we also were able to flex based on that demand to increase the budget to be able to fund 62 projects funded from 32 research organisations. And that was published this month on the BBSRC website. We're really excited about this outcome. There's some fantastic stuff that's been supported that. And we're now currently reviewing this pilot to analyse the perspectives of applicants and panellists and develop key findings for this funding model with a view to sustaining it if it can be sustained. This was the first scheme that BBSRC run on the new funding service, and it was at the time the largest scheme that had been run on the funding service at both the expression of interest and full stage. And a lot of the feedback and learning that we gained through this has been fed back into the system, has led to system improvements, which will come to bear as we move to putting our responsive mode onto the funding service. So we all benefit directly from this piloting. And it's allowed us to be more tailored in the application questions and increase the clarity for applicants and assessors. And it also meant that our applications were more consistent in a number of factors which helped the peer review process. As I've already mentioned, increasing the risk appetite meant using a number of tools differently to be able to assess that. And the scheme itself was a response from the community asking for opportunities to fund more blue skies early stage funding. For example, proposals that don't require a weight of preliminary data in order to be able to be assessed as being interesting and have potential mileage. And we used with experimenting in kind of how to assess and solicit riskier projects, and use of specific research criteria, reducing the need for track record information, and a risk supportive culture. And this was really brought to bear in another panel only assessment process. This was quite hard to do when you involve a written review stage. So that was a test. We also particularly pioneered partial randomization in this scheme, and that was something we haven't done before. And this recognised that some proposals simply are quite difficult to separate in a standard response ranking process, and there is a point where our ability to discriminate proposals breaks down. And at that point, the typical peer review process starts to look at very minor ways of separating those proposals, which may not actually have a bearing on the value of the proposal itself. So the use of partial randomization meant that in those circumstances where the panel ran out of ability to separate proposals, this was done on a randomized basis, which was considered to be a fairer way of doing it. It was only used in a relatively small number of tiebreaker decisions, but it was a useful tool that we trialed. And interestingly, we have sought feedback from everybody involved in this process to try and determine how this has landed. Did it deliver the benefits that we thought it would deliver? And generally, the feedback has been extremely positive from the panel members and chairs. They were positive with the assessment criteria and how we really managed to assess risk and support risk. And also the partial randomization approach was a big hit, so that was good to know. We gathered an awful lot of comments on what made good proposals or not, and on aspects of the scheme which we will now be using to feedback, as I've mentioned. So this brings me on to some questions for you, really, and we really welcome your views. There should be some questions appearing. These questions should be appearing by links to Mentimeter in your chat. And we'd really value your thoughts. We'd like your thoughts on what are the red lines that we need to maintain to have confidence in the process. Do we need expert reviews? Always, in every circumstance. Are generalist reviews good enough, and should proposals be written for a generalist reviewer? Should applicants always have a right to rebuttal? How important is this? here's a good one. Is peer review itself sacrosanct? Are there other ways of ensuring public money can be spent to support the best possible research that perhaps bypasses peer review entirely? What innovative approaches would you like to see trialed or more widely adopted? What are the things that we've been doing that have landed well? What are the things that we haven't tried that you'd like to see us try? Please don't be constrained by some of the things that I've been talking about, but other ideas are certainly, we'd like to hear about them. And if you could wish for one improvement to peer review processes, what would it be? That might reflect your experience of an applicant. It might reflect your experience as a committee member for BBSRC or any other organisation you're involved in, or your experience of the system as a peer reviewer. As a peer reviewer, what would help you engage better? What would help you do that more efficiently? What would make you groan less when a request for review hit your inbox? And as an applicant, what's the one thing that we could do that would make your life easier, whilst enabling us to do what we need to do to fairly assess applications, and that would increase your time, your confidence that taking the time to put in an application is worth your time? Really keen to hear your thoughts on these things. I recognise there's some philosophical questions here. You may not have something pop into your head right now, but we're going to leave those questions open for the remainder of the day. So by all means, go away, have a think, perhaps over lunch, and come back and give us your thoughts. We are keen to hear them. That's the end of my presentation. And on that note, I'm going to pass back to Guy to take us into the next session.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. So thank you for that, and interesting kind of to see those kind of new trials that you're doing, and obviously what's important is collecting the evidence base around that. And you mentioned the work across UKRI. One of the things that I'm doing is looking at some of the practices used by other research councils too, and then trying to consider what works and when it works well, when it doesn't work so well, etc., so we can kind of move forward with a little bit of confidence. So please, everybody, respond to that Mentimeter during the course of the day to those kind of pretty significant questions that Jeff has raised there. And also, as I said, moving forward, it's an area which I think is becoming increasingly important, both to the people who apply for funds, for the people who are commissioning the funds, and ultimately the public and others who are paying for the funds, to kind of feel that if we are going to change things, that we are doing it for in a confident way and a sensible way. And if anyone wants to write to me about some of the ideas, etc., you might have, then please do. It's a very live and important area. So that brings us to the final session today, which is the question and answer session, of which the executive team will be joining us. Welcome to them. I'm going to try to get through as many questions as possible, so we'll probably have individuals answering specific questions. I did have a question for Jeff, but I'll let him get his breath back after that presentation. So I think I'll start with Karen, and we have a question which has come in previous to today around the collective talent funding and what the future might hold for the CTP. I mean, all of these different terms not everyone's familiar with, but
exactly
an overview.
So I will give an overview of that. And also I've noticed in the chats a similar question come in about industrial consortia, so I'll pick that up. So as I say, just to set the context before going to the specific, as Guy mentioned earlier, as many of you will know, UKRI has made this commitment to take a collective approach to how we deliver our people and talent programmes and activities. And our first focus has been very much on doctoral training. And some of you may have seen the recent announcements about that, where we now have developed an investment framework for doctoral training, and that'll be available in the new year. But importantly, going forward, we'll have a much more harmonised approach and much more accessible approach to how we support doctoral training. And there will be two main mechanisms: Focal Awards and Landscape Awards. The Focal Awards, a bit as it says in the title, will focus on specific areas or challenges where you know that we need a concentration of studentships and perhaps a bespoke training programme around that. And that will bring in things like we come up with support like Centres for Doctoral Training. And then we will also separately support what will be referred to as Landscape Awards, and they will provide that much more flexible and broad training that will provide the capability and capacity we need in doctoral training across, in our case, the biosciences, but clearly across UKRI more broadly for the research system. BBSRC intends to invest in both focal and landscape awards. And importantly, we absolutely recognise the benefits and the impact, including innovation and providing skills for the broader economy, from involving business and industry within our landscape awards. And therefore, we will support both academic-led and business industry course consortia, much as we do currently through the collaborative training partnerships, as part of these landscape awards going forward. There will be further information about this as we start, as Guy mentioned earlier, to commission our next phase of awards, because it will look confusing, but it will, once we get used to it, be much easier for everyone to access and also to pick up multidisciplinary opportunities. In terms of finding out more, as Guy highlighted, there is a webinar on the 7th of December. I would encourage anyone who's interested further to either attend that, or there will be a recording, because I did notice there were a couple of questions that people couldn't access that. We have opened it for more people. It's great to see a great interest. And as I say, the recording will be available. So collaborative training partnerships will continue under a different name and a different framework.
Thank you, Karen. There's another question we've had around, I think it's sort of comments around there's a weakness, systematic weakness for funding in the development and testing of new technologies, and how BBSRC will tackle this. I think Amanda would like to answer this one.
Yeah, very happy to answer that question, Guy. Thank you. So in terms of the development and testing of new technologies, I really want to highlight to attendees the 2022 kind of BBSRC review of technology development, which really looked across kind of bioscience technologies and considered with expert advice topics such as the funding landscape, peer review of technology development proposals, support for research technology professionals, skills and training, and also that piece around technology development, kind of wider recognition and support. We're in the process of implementing the recommendations arising from that review now, including through the new kind of TRT, transformative technologies kind of investment program, also through adjustments around responsive mode and the assessment of technology-driven and non-hypothesis-driven proposals. Want to add to that as well also, because that's the BBSRC piece, in the wider kind of UKRI piece, really important also to acknowledge the Technology Missions Fund, where engineering biology is one of the key missions alongside artificial intelligence and also quantum technologies, with the Technology Missions Fund providing a great opportunity to work collaboratively between the biosciences and engineering, and also into innovation and commercialisation, with a whole package of measures of support there too. So hopefully that responds to the question that was posed in advance of the meeting.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. In my talk, I spoke a lot about the need to engage, and therefore the engagement of promoting biosciences, etc. So we had a question around what our vision is for supporting long-term engagement with BBSRC funded researchers and the non-specialist audiences. I think, Sarah, that you'd like to answer that one.
Yes, so thanks, Guy. So our vision is outlined in the UK Public Engagement Strategy, and that has 3 goals. There's one about really sharing that sort of shared endeavour by making research and innovation relevant and accessible to everyone, making sure that the benefits of research and innovation are shared widely by supporting collaboration and valuing the really truly diverse forms of knowledge, and creating opportunities for all by inspiring and engaging the next generation. So loads of support and case studies are available on the Good Research Resource Hub, and we can include a link in that as part of the whole suite of information that we'll give at the end of this call. So BBSRC and the people that we support have got a really long history of supporting public engagement. And we've got the dialogue events. We've had dialogues events around synthetic biology. We had the public dialogue last year around genome editing in farmed animals. Babraham Institute have just been doing a public dialogue that's been published around human embryo research. So lots of really great examples of public engagement work which BBSRC supported individuals are doing. Looking ahead, we're looking at that breadth of the public engagement conducted by those that support at the moment. So really just an opportunity here to encourage people to get in touch with us with great examples of those case studies that you want us to be aware of. Please contact myself or indeed Emma Cook, who is our new head of stakeholder engagement, who's been busily responding to lots of your questions live. So do please get in touch with us. We want to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And now that Jeff's been off camera for a little while, we're bringing back in. So that I mean, I know there's lots of questions and interest in what interdisciplinary research means to BBSRC. So could you tell us a little bit about how we might support it?
Absolutely. And I guess interdisciplinary research has really been the theme of the last spending review settlement, and the way that budgets have been allocated to ensure that we have headroom to work collectively to do exactly this. And there have been a number of ways that's been achieved. We've got the interdisciplinary response mode pilot, which is under review at the moment. BBSRC is heavily involved in the assessment of that. Our resources and our expertise and our people are helping to deliver that, and I'm sure it will improve and be refined as we go. And that offers people an opportunity to integrate bioscience in a completely agnostic way across boundaries. And then, of course, there's the more mission-led stuff, whether that's through technology missions or through the UKRI themes. And the UKRI themes are really the place where this is happening. There is a lot of money on the table in support of the UKRI themes, 375 million, although that spreads across 2 spending reviews. And BBSRC is involved in all of them, in some more than others, but in all of these themes, there are research programs that are relevant to bioscience that we are either leading, and an example that would be the Interdisciplinary AMR Networks call, which is currently live, which is under the Tackling Infections theme, which I'm leading. And there are other, so another example would be the Epidemic Preparedness call, which is actually being administered by our BBSRC colleagues on behalf of the Tackling Infections theme, but BBSRC is still around the table, and BBSRC science is absolutely integrated into that. And other examples would be through the Building a Green Futures program, which is there are a number of things on the table that we are leading, including the Land Use and Net Zero program, which is a major collaborative piece with DEFRA. So there's lots of examples of where we are coming to bear to support interdisciplinary research. And I think the feature of this spending review is that the Research Council is very much in the driving seat in kind of determining how we want to work and how we want to allocate resources to meet our priorities. So BBSRC is absolutely influencing all those things to make sure they're working for us.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. In the sort of diversity area, you know, there's some interest in terms of, you know, are the sort of research technical professionals eligible to apply for our funding schemes such as responsive mode? So either as a lead or co-lead, and you know, Amanda, you're probably best placed to answer that.
Yeah, sure. And the short answer to the question is yes. What I would encourage any potential applicant, including research technology professionals, to do is to take a close look around eligibility of individual competitions on the UKRI website, noting the kind of the BBSRC content therein. But actually there's a dedicated section as well on resources for research technology professionals, and recognising the critical role that they play, and also pivotal in terms of applications, for example, to competitions like Alert, where we know that some of the very best applications we've seen funded through Alert over the last couple of years have been led by research technology professionals.
Excellent, thank you. One thing I think I would like to say at this stage, I mean, obviously, I think we can't not comment on the fact that obviously there's been a little bit of activity around EDI and what that means to science and these types of things. And I'm sure many people on the call today are aware of some of the kind of tricky issues which some of us have had to be dealing with. And I've had questions about what does this mean to BBSRC? You know, are we going to not be as active in the EDI space as perhaps we were before? And I you know, to answer to that question, I think, you know, we're continuing to progress our published action plan for EDI. We have engagement with our expert group. We have an expert group within BBSRC on EDI, and that is still regularly consulted and offering a lot of interesting and important information. And why do we think it's important? We think it's important because of, you know, just what Amanda was kind of saying there, and I see in the chat lines from early career researchers making comments or people from industry making comments, etc., is that, you know, the people from a diversity of backgrounds bring a diversity of ideas. And we want to hear those diversity of views and think of ways in which we can encourage that to be heard. So Jeff talked about peer review. The fact is that if peer review might reduce diversity for whatever reason, we need to think of ways in which we can do other forms of peer review stroke expert evaluation to enable kind of more diverse things to come through. That's why kind of the EDI agenda is important to us and will continue to be important, and we value your suggestions on how we might continue to see that through. Somebody talked about kind of in the chat about various things. One of the things we're trying to do is the narrative CV, which kind of maybe gives the opportunity for people from a more diverse background to illustrate why they are a strong person to do X, even if they don't have a very large H index, for instance, etc., because of the nature of their career. So that's one particular move that's been done in that space. So I mean, I just want to reiterate, and hopefully it picks up a couple of the questions in the timeline. There is, we think it's important, we continue to think it's important, and we're thinking of ways in which we can move forward to welcome those diversity of ideas. And we have another question, Karen, talking about that in terms of the fellowship strategy. And I know there's comments about, I mentioned about porosity and some people saying it's a bit difficult, but if you maybe want to talk a little bit about the fellowship opportunities.
So in terms of our fellowship strategy, we will continue to invest in discovery fellowships, which we see as an incredibly successful mechanism to support that real first step for early career researchers on that pathway to scientific leadership. And importantly, we've heard the feedback from the community, and going forward, when we have the next round, we will be removing the funding cap, recognising the increasing costs for undertaking those fellowships. They will still be 3 years duration, but there will be no longer the limit on the funding which can be requested. Then more broadly, in terms of fellowship, we talked earlier about the collective approach. We focused on doctoral training initially, but now UKRI is moving to thinking collectively around fellowships, and that will include how we progress with the Future Leader Fellows, but also more broadly, some of these elements like porosity and mobility, you know, the Flexible Talent Mobility Awards that we talked about earlier, that's seen as a real success, as we say, sharing best practice across UKRI, and really interested in how we can progress that more broadly. We're also pleased yesterday to see in the autumn statement the announcement about Discovery Fellowships, but just to be clear, that isn't the BBSRC ones. This is a mid-career fellowship, and that will be funded in a different way through an endowment to the Royal Society. So again, more information around that I think will be coming in the next few months. So lots of opportunities available and a changed landscape. So feedback again, any comments you have around, you know, fellowships and how we can deliver those more effectively across UKRI are very welcome.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think we're coming to a close, but I think we can't. I mean, every one of us is aware of issues around climate change and these sorts of things. So, I mean, I've just asked maybe Sarah, you know, does BBSRC have a strategy around sustainability, perhaps in terms of how it helps institutes and or others reach the kind of the net zero target that we have.
Thanks, Guy. So in terms of the institutes, yes, so we support our strategically funded institutes both financially and with the sort of practical support and advice that's needed as well, in terms of developing their estate management plans and also associated business cases, which do have that focus on environmental impact and sustainability themes. So not just net zero, but sort of biodiversity, resource usage, waste, etc. We run a couple of calls a year, actually, for institutes, estates, capital investments, and we typically spend around 10 to 12 million pounds on that endeavour. So yes, it's really important for us, and we make sure that there's the routes to support our institutes.
Yeah, thank you. And I think one final question before we move on, and maybe Amanda might want to answer this. I mean, people often talk about kind of grant calls like buses. You know, they all come along at the same time, and or there's a sort of sometimes not much time, and that obviously sometimes people think there's a reason behind that, or why is that? You know, and cynically think, oh, this is a stitch up or whatever. But you know, maybe you could explain to us a little bit why that happens sometimes and how, you know, we're trying to deal with it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Guy. And I'll pick up as well, I think, in the comment on in the chat from Helen in relation to strategic Lolas. I think Helen White Cooper, strategic Lolas, and also other competitions. So I think in terms of perhaps picking up on the S-Lolas first, we have been over the last year where we are seeing a wave of new programs being launched, certainly working very carefully in terms of the how we position those programs and the amount of time required for application and also for peer reviewing, and having to pull some calls forward a little bit, push others back a little bit. And I think with the S-Lola piece, so Helen, your specific question, there is still a very, I think, a reasonable window. So I think it's about 3.5 months for the development of ideas to pull through into, I think it's the outline applications. But I think it's absolutely right. Yes, we have pulled that forward a little bit just to position it in the context of the wider workload in terms of resources within BBSRC, and also the pressure on the peer review community. Building out from that point a little bit, yes, there have certainly been calls really funded through the last spending review, where I would say some of them have had quite short windows to develop applications. And I think of several examples there, particularly around, I think, some of the Technology Missions Fund calls, and also think around some of the strategic themes too. And what this is reflecting actually is the way that the funding, we have the time that we have to deploy and spend that funding. Now, and it sounds like a level of complexity here, but some of that funding is actually UKRI funding, other funding we're delivering on behalf of partners. For example, the Department for Science, Innovation, Invention and Technology. Where we're doing that, it often comes with requirements that we will have to complete all expenditure on awards by a certain point in time. So working back from that point, that can sometimes lead to relatively short windows. But we feel it's still important to be able to embrace those competitions and launch those competitions out into the community. And there has been, as we've seen in some of the competitions around AI and equally engineering biology as well, strong responses and equally excellent awards being made. But we do recognise that probably over the last kind of 12 months, it's been a particularly pressured time. And moving ahead, I think it will start to even out a little bit more into that business as usual kind of pacing, if that helps, Guy, and
yeah.
Helen, of course, for the original question.
Yeah, thanks very much, Amanda. And I think that links to kind of Jeff's comments as well about why we need to be innovative in our thinking about how we do some of these things, because a method developed in the 1940s might not be appropriate for some of the speed by which we need to do things today. So I'd just like to close today's webinar. It's been recorded. We will follow up with some of the links that people have requested, and some of the questions and answers. If we haven't quite answered them, again, we'll look at those and come back to you on that. There's a short Zoom survey immediately after the webinar to provide some feedback, should you be willing to do that. But also Jeff's Mentimeter on Ving, please have a look at that too. What I'd just like to say now is thank you to my colleagues who have joined me around the table, the technical support from the team, which has made this run incredibly smoothly. It's always a big panic when you've got things like this on, in which there could be a bit of a hitch. And for Nick for joining us to talk about commercialisation. And very importantly, that's our community, for being honest in some of your comments, and hopefully we've been frank in terms of our feedback and in terms of answering your questions. We want to work together to move things forward, and I think it's a really exciting time looking forward for the biosciences, and we need to embrace all those opportunities that are out there, but we need to work together to work out how best to take advantage of those opportunities, and or to look at some of these big questions about peer review, or about what AI might offer to biosciences, or how engineering biology might solve some of the big problems, but with bioscience very much at the heart of it. And that's why we need to connect, why we need to engage. And I'd like to see 2024 as the year by which we really come back together to actually work in an engaged fashion to kind of rise to the challenge that's been set to all of us. So thanks very much for joining us, and I look forward to meeting many of you face to face in the near future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.